Aha! Now you'll be up. There we go. There we go. Now you can hear me. Well, good morning. Now you can hear me. Now you guys can hear me. Now I work it out. Well, good morning, everyone. That was just an early act of a mime. Thank you, Ian. It works. It works. That's right. Thank God for that. Well, there we go. Guys. Good morning. Welcome to Solid Ground. Take two. Seeing I had not plugged one thing in. Again, I can't easily show you all here, but it's a relatively simple setup. But there's a few wires going that connect things like the microphone and the camera, of course. And silly old me had plugged everything in except a little power cable. It turns out that the microphone requires power, and to do that requires me to push a rather obscure button, which I had not. And the production team had told me how to do these things. They even show me on this production software where to see whether the sound's working, and I didn't look at it. To be fair, the sound button, or what allows me to understand the sounds is working, is a green bar. If it isn't a bad joke for the morning, I don't really do anything to do with green bars. Anyway, good morning. Welcome to Solid Ground. Welcome back. And thank you for everyone who's commenting already. Look, you'll be viewing this across multiple platforms. You'll either be on the likes of Family First Facebook page. It's LinkedIn, YouTube, of course. Some of you will be viewing this from my own Facebook page. I love doing these lives, and I particularly love engaging with your comments and thoughts and challenges. So drop those in the comments. They're best put in the Family First Facebook page comments. They come directly to me here on my computer. Technology is amazing these days, but we haven't quite got the sophistication yet to be able to draw all the comments from all the platforms into one space. So again, if you want to hear, or rather me to comment to you, if you want to raise some particular points this morning on the topics we're discussing, hit up the Family First page and put your comments in there, and they'll come directly to me, including, of course, some wits, a wit or two of mine at Family First who have, yes, noted I needed one of these. I still don't have a branded mug. We'll have to work on that. But yes, I need coffee. I need more. Maybe I need more coffee. But yeah, good morning, everyone. Look, there's quite a bit to discuss today. There's been a lot going on, and some of these topics actually this morning are a bit heavy, because one of the things I do want to briefly touch on is euthanasia of all things. So yes, all get yourselves an even stronger cup of coffee. But there's a whole slew, if you will, of political things happening at the moment which also need addressing in no particular order. But as I say, welcome to Solid Ground. Good to have you back. As I say, drop your thoughts, comments. Let me know where you are in the country in the comment box. The best way to do it is on the Family First site. So look, a couple of things, if I can make this work. I've just got to always check things here. And there we go. There we go. I'm trying to show you, as you'll see, a web page. But being the Herald, it has whole lots of whistles and bells. So this is just a quick couple of political comments on what's happening at the moment. Last week, the government announced that it would give $1 million to the United Nations, or more specifically, a group called UNRWA. UNRWA basically looks after the Palestinians, which in and of itself is a good thing, you would think. Unfortunately, UNRWA is a completely corrupt organisation. So bad move by the government is what I'm wanting to suggest. As I say, there was no need to make this payment, and I'm not even referring to obviously the terrible behaviours of Hamas and others. Recently, I know when I used to chair the Foreign Affairs Committee, and after that had raised issues about UNRWA many times. Basically, the money that New Zealand and other countries give is then, if you will, funneled, maybe the word should be funneled to the likes of Hamas, who are then running schools that press their ideology, and over successive years, when in Parliament, produced evidence time and time again of terrorist-inspired textbooks that were given to children. this is where your money's going, to promote terrorism. So I have no time for this supposed investigation that's being done. I think it's a bit of a whitewash. I just think completely, I'm just going to say it again, completely the wrong call. Look, we're going to talk on Gaza. Obviously, any and all lives killed is terrible. This was the raid the Israelis undertook a few days ago to rescue 4 hostages. Hamas and the pro-Hamas supporters are making a big deal of these civilians killed. Obviously tragic, absolutely tragic, of course. But it seems to be lost on a number of commentators that this just confirms that Hamas does use the civilian population as shields. And to those who somehow think a state should not go and seek out its own citizens who have been kidnapped, you're basically barking mad. And for those listening in going, what's he talking about? Well, there's a number of commentators out there, particularly from the pro-Hamas groups, who are saying that the hostages should have been left. Should have been left there. Well, no, they shouldn't. And unfortunately, the deaths just illustrate that Hamas has no moral code and was more than happy to hide hostages in civilian areas, and sadly, with many of those civilians knowing that was happening. Now, that doesn't justify, to be really clear, that doesn't justify indiscriminate deaths, but it really does highlight the situation. And then we've got this, guys, I follow China quite closely. So we've got the premier, he's like the number 2 of the Communist Party in China. Think of him as like the Prime Minister. So you've got President Xi Jinping, that's like the head of state, not quite a king or queen, although he acts that way. But we've got this fella coming this week. It's now public. Some of us had, you may or may not have known about it for various reasons. Look, for what it's worth, it's important that we trade with China. So I've had some people messaging me already over the last day or so since the news broke. In fact, it was yesterday afternoon they released it publicly. Is this a good or a bad thing? Well, at the end of the day, we do trade with China. It's almost 30% of our GDP. We do trade with them, and it's important that we do. A lot of the elements of our life are at this point reliant. But I am pleased to give bouquets where required, that the government is indicating it will have robust discussions with China. Will certainly raise human rights issues. So again, think of the Uyghurs, the Muslim Uyghurs who are being persecuted in the likes of concentration camps. We obviously have the Tibetans, Falun Gong, the terrible things which continue to happen in Hong Kong. They've banned a song there now because it's far too pro-democracy, which is exceptionally sad. And then, of course, you have the interferences here in New Zealand, and I think that should be raised. China is not only breaching human rights in its own country, but it's trying to undermine our own. And if any of you have been following me of late, you'll know that myself, Larissa Wall, and Marie Brady, they attempted to break into our computer systems. They've tried to break into Parliament's computer systems. Myself and Larissa have been named in a court case in Hong Kong recently, part of an absolute sham case against democracy activists. So let's see if the government's got any chutzpah, any balls, there we go, I've said the word, sorry, to actually stand up and speak to these things on behalf of New Zealand. So that's some of the political things in play. So Ian notes, this is around the UNRWA funding. It's one of those things he says, we'll not do that again. I'll check. I think if you're referring to what the government's doing with UNRWA, it's, we won't do it. But then we've checked and changed our mind. Trish says, disappointed in the government's support for UNRWA. It looks, obviously I am. I wouldn't have mentioned it, but at the end of the day, we could have given money to the UN in general, if you wanted, for other purposes, but UNRWA is completely and utterly corrupt. Their schools have been used by terrorists. UNRWA employees, so again, New Zealand money and others, has been funding those who were involved with the terrorist acts on October 7th. So pretty bad. Wrong decision by the government there. So that's unfortunate. Hey, look, what I thought I'd also draw your attention to is a couple of, I'm just clearing the way here to make sure it works properly. This is a heavy topic, but it's an important one because euthanasia is coming back up on the radar. The government's meant to be doing a review by the end of the year into its physician-assisted suicide and euthanasia laws. Now, interestingly enough, they're not really saying much about it. Media are running, by and large, puff pieces. telling you how amazing things are. But here's a case in very recent days where the cancer diagnosis was incorrectly given to a woman in Christchurch. Very sad, as you can imagine, but it was a complete and total mix-up. But at the time, she was being told by the doctors that she had cancer riddled throughout her body, and she only had a little short time to live. And you probably can't see it on the resolutions in your screens, but long and short, she started planning her own funeral. She started talking to people about, well, they talk about it as assisted dying. Let's call it what it is. It's euthanasia, or physician-assisted suicide. So she started pondering that, and I suppose that there's a picture of her there, and I think it's her son. So she thought she had cancer. I think that's about it. Unfortunately, guys, I can't see the script. It's all blurry to me because it's so small. But long and short, here's a person with an incorrect diagnosis who started, not irrationally, to consider whether euthanasia was for her. I don't think it's the right decision, but it's not irrational to consider it. Fortunately, she didn't go ahead with it. Be under no illusion, in New Zealand, this could have happened as short as 24 hours. These are the failings within the current law, which would actually allow a woman like this, granted through unfortunate circumstances, to have ended her life, because there are not the sufficient checks and safeguards. Once you ask for assisted suicide in New Zealand, the process moves exceptionally quickly. So fortunately she did not do this, but it just begins to highlight some of the risks, which again our flimsy, was it 25 page piece of law doesn't really cover. You then have this absolutely horrific case coming out of Holland, or the Netherlands at the moment. This is a 40-year-old woman. By the way, the picture, the picture is of a 17-year-old who was euthanized. So this is where we're headed in New Zealand. Okay, so basically those who support euthanasia, the advocates for it, really are a suicide on demand type group, because it's the only logical conclusion philosophically, but also I might add by reality. We only have to look, as I say, at the Netherlands, who are euthanizing people left, right and centre. So the picture is of a 17-year-old girl who was effectively depressed and had enough, which in itself is horrific, absolutely horrific. But the case itself refers to a 40-year-old woman. She's married with 2 children, but she too is depressed. So we're talking about mental health, the extension from terminal illness now into mental health. So this is, and I can't show you the whole article, I'm afraid, because it's behind a paywall, and I thought I'd be ethical for a change. But a 40-year-old woman with 2 young children is about to kill herself. And her husband's saying, oh, well, I'm supportive. Well, as my wife noted to me, I mean, that's a jolly big red flag if your husband's saying, oh, well, if you want to kill yourself, I understand. What sort of relationship is going on there? And a woman prepared to leave her 2 young children behind. I mean, this just screams a person in huge need. And yet in Holland and the Netherlands, it's been celebrated. I have no doubt here in New Zealand, pro-death advocates would be all over this. Oh, yeah, she wants to end her life. I mean, it's just utterly tragic. So on one hand, we've got this Christchurch woman inquiring about euthanasia after her diagnosis. Fortunately, they realised they'd made a mix-up and didn't allow that to progress. Otherwise, a perfectly healthy New Zealander would have been killed. You have in Holland, a 40-year-old woman wanting to kill herself, and it being celebrated effectively, despite her going to leave behind 2 children and a husband. And the final one, and this is referencing a story from a couple of years ago, and kudos actually to Guy on Espiner. Let's be under no illusion, and I know it's a heavy topic, guys, but you've got to, without sounding too imperative or too instructive, you've got to think and talk about these things. Because if you listen to mainstream media, they'll just tell it's all a happy situation. There was a woman the other week who died on a beach, but there's information coming out. It was via a Jordan Peterson interview with a Canadian medic, who was also referencing some specialists who were noting in America that the drugs that they give people the muscle relaxants are such that it can be a bit grotesque if you're not interested in health things, but long and short, the drugs they give in the United States and in Canada are the same drugs they give to those on death row in the American context. And what that does, the muscle relaxant collapses your muscles, strangely enough, including your lungs, which then basically fill with fluid and you drown. And the Peterson interview was sort of referencing, or the person he was interviewing who was in the military, was saying it's very similar to that torture waterboarding. It's one of the reasons why waterboarding as a technique's been banned, because effectively as they pour water over you, you begin to affect drowning. And so they're making the link, as this Canadian specialist was doing, that actually the drugs that they administer cause the same dynamic here. But of course with euthanasia you don't know. Once you've put in the muscle relaxant, you've effectively paralysed the person. I mean, it's just god awful. But why I show this article is one of our eminent professors in the palliative care space, Rod McLeod, talked about this in the Guy and Espiner piece. You can look up the title and read it more specifically, but what's been said here is it's not always happy and simple. So take even the moral, ethical elements out of the equation for a moment. Euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, doesn't always bring about a quick death. People can linger for quite some time. And in the New Zealand context, just so you understand, the authorities are so scared of truth that they won't tell you what drugs they use. They won't tell you from the point of administration to when the point of death is. So again, if you're one sitting there going, euthanasia is okay, they'll inject me and then I'm dead. No, no. You could be there for hours and hours, as that RNZ article touches on, and other information coming out. And also in New Zealand, the doctor doesn't need to be with you. The doctor can, as they probably do here, they come and collect their money, because they're well paid to do this, by the way. They don't talk about that as well, nor do they want their names published, because they're gutless. So they can inject you and then just walk away. And again, the sad reality is that if you're the one receiving this treatment, as they like to call it, a death dose, as I'd prefer to name it, you're stuffed, literally and figuratively. So no, it's just awful, absolutely awful. So I know it's a heavy topic, guys, but you need to understand, basically, you need to understand just how horrific this is and can become. It can become. So yeah. So just a couple of questions over from a crew at the Family First team, noting this is around the euthanasia question. Is significant that she made inquiries. That's exactly right. Obviously there's a major failure here, that, a diagnosis was wrong. I think they mixed up the notes, but she made inquiries and that process had started. So yeah, it's not good. Amanda notes that if nurses and doctors were trained, people would die well. They're not qualified. Depending where, Amanda, you're going, I think unfortunately very few of our doctors and nurses are sufficiently trained in palliative care to understand what's required there. And in New Zealand, you've got the really, really sad situation, I think, that a lot of people can't if you're in Auckland, you can probably get relatively good palliative care. But if you're in the back blocks of the country, your GP may or may not know what is and isn't available. But I mean, in short, palliative care. Then, Amanda, you will know better than myself. There's people like yourself, very, very well trained, but I suspect what you've just indicated is a lot of your colleagues are not, sadly, and it needs to be more training. Before I left Parliament, I actually had a bill in the ballot around palliative care, which was basically, more funding and training is needed. I made an off-the-cuff an aside about how well the doctors who do euthanasia are paid, but palliative care is not. I think New Zealanders need to understand most palliative care is funded through the charities, or the hospices are, for sure. Bob says, if the wife suggests euthanasia, that's a red flag. Yes, even in your case, Bob, it would be a red flag, but yes, like the Dutch case, the husband's sort of quite stoical about it, which I think is horrendous. If any of our wives, husbands, and I shouldn't actually pluralise, it makes it sound like we've got multiple, but if our respective wives and husbands were asking to do something crazy, we'd want to stop it. not celebrate it. It's just absolutely shocking. Absolutely shocking. By the way, for the likes of Amanda and that who are involved in palliative care, sorry, that's my wife now texting me, but something completely separate to this. If people have views or perspectives, do get in touch. Obviously, you can get through social media or email me. Be very, very welcome to hear from that. Look, a couple of last little points. Now, because we're on heavy topics, I'm going to share this. I don't want us to get too caught up in it. This is coming out of Canada. I mean, what is wrong with Canadians at the moment? But they're apologising. The Cancer Society in... Put your children away, by the way, if you're worried about this. Apologised to a group of trans activists that they tend to use the word cervix. Rather, they now should be using the term front hole. And why am I putting this here? Well, one, you need to be aware of these things. You need to be aware of these stupidities. But there's a couple of points to be made. First and foremost, notice with a lot of these changes being pushed by activists, it doesn't matter if it's within this trans space and the wider sexuality space, even climate change, other elements of health, the lack of precision in language. Like, one of the things as humans we've prided ourselves on over many, many generations is that we increase our knowledge. And that often reflects in language. We make our language more precise. This is a very regressive movement on so many levels. But when you are down to the language of a 2-year-old, talking about holes that are on the front or on the back to describe elements of the human anatomy, you really are indicating how completely out of touch you are. So, as I say, that lack of precision is just one thing I wanted to indicate to you. So when you're out and about talking with people in any area, actually, if their language is becoming so completely simplified when there is actually a better and more precise term, when people are using a lot of euphemisms, so harking back to the euthanasia question, you should have a little red light going off in your head. So like with that Cancer Society, we're now renaming technical parts of the body according to the mind of a 2-year-old. The other is, of course, this has been done in the name of inclusivity, to include men, a very small handful of men and their proclivities. The experience of women has been erased. So what it is to be, and I mean, I can't fully comment, I'm a man, but isn't that ironic too? Very little of this is in the men's space. It's just erasing women. So this is the other thing about inclusivity. Don't buy it, by and large, as a concept. I mean, it sounds lovely, doesn't it? But more often than not, to include what shouldn't be there excludes others. So, the best example is in sport at the moment. Oh, it's wonderful and inclusive that all these men are now in women's sport. Well, yeah, okay, well, they feel included, jolly good for them. But a number of women who have worked hard and trained hard are being excluded. They're not winning, they're not getting the kudos that they should. So, yeah, it's just crazy. And as I said, Bob fortunately says it's an excellent point. Parents are always told they're supposed to use particular body parts to avoid confusion. But at the same time, these same groups are then saying, now we should dumb it down. As I say, the dumbing down shows the lack of, well, it's not technical knowledge. They do know what they're talking about. Well, some of them don't, clearly, but I said that lack of precision should be to people, and that's why I'm talking about it this morning, should be a red flag to you. Okay, so if someone is starting to use that type of language, and think of terms like chest feeders and all of this carry on, in the English language, as with most other languages that have a level of sophistication, we're able to be more precise, and that enables us to have a better and deeper understanding. When you're going down to terms like front hole, chest feeder, breeder instead of parent or mother, for example, that lack of precision should be a warning light. And by the way, I don't like the idea of our language being basically regressing to that of a 2-year-old. Jumping across onto another quick topic, because I'm conscious it's up to 8:30. Just back to some of the media reporting. Part of the reason I do Solid Ground is to try and sort of just highlight some of the issues that we're seeing. So we've talked about the precision of language, we've talked about euphemism. This is just an example of the protests that some of you may be aware happened over the weekend It was around supposedly the fast track approvals bill. So to be fair, it gives enormous power to the government of the day to fast track, as the bill says, certain and major projects. The protest was a mishmash, though, of environmental activists. By the way, people are allowed to protest as long as it's peaceful, but environmental activists, Maori sovereignty activists, Gazan activists. It was, again, the usual mishmash, to the extent that some journalists had noted that when they asked people about it, they had no idea what was going on. But here's a good example of, first and foremost, the Herald here is reporting there's 20,000 people, whereas News Talk said, well, there was just over 1,000 people. So which was correct? The news outlet that's saying there was 20,000 people, or the news outlet saying 1,000? Look, I'm not going to put money on either. I think probably both are wrong. I would suggest to you, if there were 20,000 people protesting, you would certainly know it. You would certainly know it in Auckland. I'd also note, see, I've been to many, not so much protests, but I used to go, particularly when I was in Wellington, to the March for Life. And why I mention that is easily 3,000 or so people, and I can say that with some definitiveness because actually the organisers would literally count people who came through, because you would enter the Parliament grounds for March for Life through a single gate. So the team would count. So you'd have maybe 3, sometimes 4,000 or 5,000 people, which is amazing. But the media would never report it. In fact, if any of you can, any of you are welcome to talk to me and prove me otherwise, but you basically saw very little to no reporting of the March for Life. But because this is a Green Maori Party, pro-Gazan Hamas thing, it gets lots and lots of coverage and then inflated information, so quite sad. And then maybe the final point to put is this Maori Party MP. It sounds like she's been involved in quite corrupt practices. So if you haven't been following the news, what's happened here, excuse me, without getting too belaboured into it, but basically the likes of the Māori marae, hosting, for want of a better term, government services, but then pilfering that information to then help elect. And this woman was elected by a margin of, I think, 42 votes. But long and short, now under investigation. But why I thought I'd mention it is it's not fully independent, which I think is a bit of a worry for a couple of reasons. So one, does this need to be investigated? Absolutely. Where there's smoke, there's fire. So it's not just her. It's not just the Māori marae, the Waipareta Trust. That's John Tamahiri's crowd. They take millions and millions of your dollars a year. There's major concerns around their behaviours. And I would note it's remarkable how quiet the Maori Party's gone of late. But unfortunately, the inquiry is being done through the Public Service Commission. So that's like the umbrella organisation over all the government agencies. Personally, I think it's the wrong call. The Prime Minister's decided that's how to have an independent inquiry. You can call it independent, but it's not. It really should have been a retired judge or an ombudsman or someone brought in completely separate from the public service. Not only because I don't think the Public Service Commission itself can be fully neutral in this regard, but also the results of this need to be beyond reproach. Needs to be beyond reproach. And that's really, really important. I wrote on my Substack last week about the American situation with Donald Trump and Hunter Biden. I noted how the courts over there are becoming politicised, political lawfare, as some people have spoken, long and short, using the courts to pursue political opponents. Now, I want to be clear, I don't think that's what the government's doing here with Te Pāti Māori or the Maori Party, but there can be no perception of this, and there can be no wiggle room for the likes of the Maori Party to claim this, because they will. They'll try to claim this as a persecution of them because they're Maori and it's racist and all the usual stuff. So there can be no hint of that. So this needed to be fully and completely independent, and I'm saddened that it's not. So anyway, guys, I am conscious of the time. Thank you for your various messages. I haven't got to all of them this morning because I prattled too much. I've prattled too much. But can I just encourage you, as I say, keep commenting. I will try over the course of today to jump online and read the comments. For those of you who are listening, as I say, if you're on the Family First Facebook page, those comments come directly to me. If you're commenting on YouTube or LinkedIn, or if you're on my page, for example, I will see them later. I just can't see them immediately right now. But look, there's a whole lot of other great content being created by the Family First team at the moment. If you haven't already, check out Pulse Point. My colleague Tumby does like a weekly roundup. Excuse my voice. A weekly roundup of information. We have Straight Talk that was on last night. There's a panel show led by Bob McCoskrie. We talk about the issues of the week. I keep, because I can, my own little Substack on point, where this is an older article I wrote, but Substack, look up On Point, where I write most weeks on different topics. As some of you know, I'm on Reality Check now every Friday morning at 10 a.m. I'm there chatting away on, well, various topics I think interesting. You might have a different opinion, but check that out. And I'm looking for one last thing here. I'm going to advertise it in voice, but if I can get, there we go. I was quick enough to do it. I found it. There we go. Forum on the Family. If you want to sit down and hear from some amazing speakers from New Zealand around the world, come to Forum on the Family. That's, well, as it says, on the 5th of July. I'll put the link in afterwards, or the Family First crew. Well, look, come and join us. Registration is easy. A wonderful lineup of speakers. So please check all of those out. There's just no shortage. Obviously, McBlog, Bob does often a morning chat. So come and listen to him there. Otherwise, guys, that's it. That's it from me. And you're going, oh, thank God for that. Thank God for that. I eventually found the on button to get the sound working. Hey, lovely to have you join me, as I say, here every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. We've got Straight Talk that's on live on a Monday night. That was last night. Bob and I are also looking to do like a Straight Talk, if you will, political special on a Thursday afternoon. So keep an eye out for that. And then, as I say, you've got Reality Check Radio with me on a Friday morning for 2 hours. If you've got suggestions of who you'd like to hear from and all that, just on all or any of this. Oh, and by the way, I didn't put it up, but go to Family First YouTube, where you can come on to our social media accounts. I sat down and talked with Dr. Joanna Howe. She's the most amazing pro-lifer out of Australia. So Dr. Joanna Howe, she is a Rhodes Scholar, a graduate, a doctorate from Oxford University. She's a professor of law, a mother of 5, and an absolute champion for pro-life issues. So she's incredible. I sat down and talked with her. So check out our Family Matters. I can't whip that up on the screen quick enough for you, but well worth checking out. But guys, that's it from me. I hope you have a wonderful day. It's always been fantastic to join you. Have a great Tuesday. We'll talk to you again soon.